Recording. All right. A couple of odds and ends to talk about. Oh, come on, Jess. Don't yawn already. I haven't even said anything.
I'm always tired.
You got to be you got to let me say something boring first. Okay, first. Several of you pointed out that I misspoke on Monday when I said chapter 14 is the most challenging one in the book. Chapter 14 is the lead-in to chapter 15, which is the most challenging one in the book. So if you read 14 and you thought it wasn't too bad, awesome. Read chapter 15, turn in that module analysis. Okay. In the let's turn lemons into lemonade department, Jack, does that reference mean anything to you?
Yeah, like making do with what you've got.
Yes, exactly. I hope you guys are having time to observe what's happening in the macro economy in the US today. It's a terrific experiment. We're going to learn a lot from this. As I expect you've noticed, many businesses like restaurants, movie theaters, and a lot of other ones are laying workers off due to insufficient demand for their products. What do laid off workers do?
File for unemployment.
Hannah, you're smiling. You must know the answer. What do unemployed workers do?
Try and find jobs where they can or file for unemployment.
Okay, but there's something more directly important to us. What don't they do? Spend money, right. So when you get laid off, you cut back on your spending, which causes problems for other businesses and other layoffs. Laid off workers have trouble paying the rent. They have trouble making mortgage payments, which means that landlords, banks, and other financial institutions lose money, which can lead to more layoffs. What are we describing here? What is writ large by this story?
Recession?
That is true, but that's not what I was looking for.
Liquidity trap?
Not necessarily, because we don't know if we're in a liquidity trap based on what I said. What I described was the expenditure multiplier, okay, going in the wrong direction, right? So spending falls, income falls, spending falls, income falls, and we're not at the bottom yet. In other words, I haven't been lying to you all semester. This stuff is for real. Mars excited by that, I can tell. Okay, so here's a question for you to start thinking about. What policy or policies can help the situation? Given the large scale of needs, where should policy be targeted? We can't do everything. Okay, so these are questions that we're going to be talking about as the semester goes along. In the not too distant future, we will be done with all the theory, and then we're going to have to start talking about what do you do with it? Okay, so what's the appropriate policy going to be? All right, hey Sierra. Took me a while to recognize you with that bright light behind you. It's okay though. Rachel, what are you drinking? That looks monstrous.
It's the same water bottle you comment on.
Oh, okay, because it's really big.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. So that's the end of that odd and end. Here's another one. Several of you have asked about sticky prices in the simple ADAS model. I guess this is one of those things that I thought you guys already knew about, but some of you don't, so I thought I would explain a little bit. Suppose the economy is at full employment like it was a month or so ago, and aggregate demand increases. We know that businesses initially respond to an increase in demand by increasing their output. How do they typically do that at first? What do they need
Bumping up prices.
in order to produce more? What do they need?
Hire more workers.
Or labor.
They need more labor. What's the easiest way to get labor?
Increase hours or hire more people.
Well, increasing hours is commonly what happens because you've already got them there. There's another problem. If you're at full employment, everyone already has a job. So it's going to be difficult to find new workers anyway. Okay. What we do know is that businesses don't immediately raise prices. Okay, that is an empirical fact. Let's suppose at your local diner one night, there is a run on the meatloaf. Okay. The diner probably doesn't do what microeconomic theory suggests they should do, which is raise the price of meatloaf, right? What do they do instead of raising the price?
Make more meatloaf.
Until they run out. And then they say, sorry, we don't have any more. Okay. So that is a very good example of the fact that short-term businesses often don't raise their prices in the face of demand. There are a number of reasons why they might do this. Can you think of any? Why, in the face of an increase in demand, would businesses perhaps not raise their prices first?
Because an increase in prices might cause people to actually demand less of it.
People to what?
Demand less, like for demand.
No, because the demand, there's an increase in demand. The demand curve shifts out. So sure, increasing the price could cause fewer people to buy, but they still have a lot of people buying. Okay, that's just the fact, but that's not quite the reason or a reason for why they don't raise prices.
Plenty of substitutes.
You mean that because there are substitutes, companies don't want to raise their prices and risk losing business that way?
I guess potentially.
Potentially, but that's really the same argument that Rachel gave. Okay, you guys are thinking about this from the perspective of microeconomic theory, which I get. You know, it's what we taught you, but you need to think about it from a macro perspective, or anyway, the theory of the firm as discovered by macroeconomists.
Is it menu costs? So they'd have to change all the prices on the menu and the cost.
Okay, that's a good answer. All right, that is the third thing on my list. The first thing on my list is businesses want to make sure that the increase in demand is permanent before they increase prices. If it's just a transitory thing, they tend to keep their prices the same. That feeds into answer number two, reason number two. Price increases potentially piss off your customers. Okay, and businesses are sensitive, especially businesses like grocery stores or restaurants that make their money on repeat customers. They want to keep their repeat customers happy. Okay, it's different when you're buying a car or a house, something that you don't do very often. So you want to be sure the demand is permanent. You want to be sure, you want to avoid pissing off your customers. And then the third thing is this thing that Jack brought up, which is called menu costs. Menu costs is really a metaphor for a broader set of behaviors. Let me ask you, Jack, what is the idea behind menu costs?
So, like, you raise the price by so much, then you have to change on all your menus.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a restaurant, and you have to change your prices for whatever reason, then you have to print new menus, okay? And that's expensive to do. So again, you don't want to have to go through that expense unless you really, really have to, okay? So there are a number of reasons why businesses' first response to an increase in demand isn't to increase the price, okay? And we've only touched on a few of those. There are others, and I'm not sure that we know that economists know 100% why businesses do this. There are probably some other reasons as well. Okay, if the demand persists, they will raise prices to cover their higher labor costs, because remember, they're working their workers overtime, and that costs them more than the normal rate. As they raise their prices, output will return to normal levels. And by normal levels, what I mean is potential GDP. Because as wages go up, it makes producing that extra output less desirable, since the cost per unit has gone up as well. Okay, now, it's not that higher prices reduce demand in the normal microeconomic way. Rather, think about how we derive the aggregate demand curve from ISLM. A higher price level increases money demand and drives up interest rates. With higher interest rates, you get reduced autonomous expenditure and reduced GDP. So that's the sequence of events that is going to get us back to potential real GDP. Okay, now, what we're saying here to sort of summarize is, in the short run, GDP can be greater than or less than potential. Unemployment can be less than or greater than the natural rate of unemployment. This introduces the idea of the unemployment gap, which is just like the output gap. The output gap is the difference between actual GDP and potential. The unemployment gap is the difference between current unemployment. Hey, Bo.
Hello.
Where are you?
I'm on a mountain.
Cool. What mountain?
Mary's Rock.
Oh, I love Mary's Rock. Yeah, Appalachian Trail.
Yeah. I was
Nice.
wondering where. Yeah.
I'm glad you could join us.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No worries.
Yeah. No
Okay.
problem.
So the unemployment gap is the difference between the unemployment rate and the natural rate of unemployment, right? So if you think about it, there's a parallel between the output gap and the unemployment gap, and we're going to talk more about that today or perhaps tomorrow. Okay, so again, in the short run, well, the short run is the period of time when the price level is fixed and output can be greater or less than potential. The long run is when the output gap and the unemployment gap are zero and the price level is flexible. So in the long run, we operate at potential output and at the natural rate of unemployment. So that is the sticky price part of the story. Yeah, I'm sorry, Matthew, you said something?
Oh, could you say that one more time?
In the short run, GDP can be greater or less than potential. Unemployment can be greater or less than the natural rate. and the price level is fixed. When the price level starts to adjust, we're moving in the direction of the long run. In the long run, GDP is back at potential, unemployment is back at the natural rate, and the price level is flexible. That's what moves us from the short run to the long run. Other questions? You there, Aspen?
Yeah,
Just writing notes like crazy?
pretty much.
Okay. All right, now back to the main event. Remember the 3 steps. What we're doing is we're going to develop the aggregate supply curve, the dynamic aggregate supply curve. And there are 3 steps to that. The first is the Phillips curve, the second is ECON's law, and the third is the aggregate supply curve. Okay, these are the near-term goals that we talked about on Monday. All right. Now, one other thing that struck me as I was putting these notes together, do you remember the model that we did, I think, the first or second day of class this semester? I think I called it Model 0. The dynamic aggregate demand, aggregate supply model is similar to that Model 0. Okay, it's a more complex way to tell the story, but it's looking at the same things. So you may find it useful at some point to go back and look at your notes from the first week and just compare what's going on. All right, so remember when we were talking about the original Phillips curve, let me share my screen here. I know you're excited to see the screen and have me talk less. The Phillips curve is the hypothesized inverse relationship between unemployment, which is on the horizontal axis, and inflation, which is on the vertical axis. And you can see from 1960 to 1969, there was a clear negative curved relationship, which is what the theory said. Okay, then something happened beginning in the 70s and going into the 80s, and the Phillips curve appeared to develop a positive slope, which is not at all what the theory says. So what I proposed to you at the end of last class is what's really going on here is the curve still exists, but it's shifting out so that the trade-off is still negative, but it's not as desirable a trade-off, because what you were seeing here is increases in both inflation and unemployment as we moved through the years in this direction. Okay. So the answer, the first answer to this curious situation is called the expectations augmented Phillips curve, and that's what we're going to develop next. Okay. The expectation augmented Phillips curve was devised independently by Friedman and by Phelps in the late 1960s. Okay. It's based on the concept of the natural rate of unemployment. Did we talk about that a little bit at the very end of last class? Good, I thought we did. Okay, the natural rate of unemployment is what we mean when we talk about full employment. The natural rate of unemployment is the rate of unemployment, the measured rate of unemployment that exists when cyclical unemployment is 0. So we're out of recession, the economy is doing well, and that's full employment. Okay. Another important term for you to know is the NAIR, N-A-I-R. Let me just write it down. I'm going to write it here, and then I'm no. How about that? No. Move that down there. NAIRU. That is an acronym. Has anybody heard of that before, the NAIRU? It reminds me of an island in the Pacific Ocean, but it's not the same thing.
Accelerated inflation.
What's that? Say it, Jack.
Can't remember it fully. I've heard of it before. It's from about, is it
Non-accelerating
yeah,
inflation rate of unemployment.
There you go.
Okay. The NAIRU is the non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment. Okay. The idea is how far can we push the unemployment rate down before inflation starts to accelerate? So that would put us right around here. Okay. That is another way that economists have tried to empirically measure the natural rate of unemployment, is by looking at the NAIRU. Does that make sense to everybody? So full employment is the concept. The natural rate is the theoretical idea. And the NAIRU is a way to empirically measure the natural rate. All right. Any questions before we move on? It's going to get exciting here, guys.
Can you repeat what A is again?
A, accelerating.
Yeah, thank you.
Non-accelerating. Okay, see what you see here at Aspen is from this end of the curve all the way to about here. Inflation is just barely rising. But once you get to this point, inflation is taken off. That's the accelerating part. So the question is, how far can you go before the inflation rate starts to accelerate? Other questions? All right, let's go to the whiteboard because I can. All right, share whiteboard. All right. For me, the most intuitive way to understand the expectations augmented Phillips curve is by using something called the job search theory of unemployment. So that's what I'm going to sketch out here. There are going to be two graphs here. One is here. And the other one is over here. Because, you know, in macro, unlike micro, one set of axes just doesn't cut it. Macro is cool like that. All right, now let's start on the left-hand side. Okay, so the job search theory of unemployment has two things on the axes. On the, let's see, text, and let's make this red. Down here, we have the duration of unemployment. Let me see if I can pull this over. Well, that's not very helpful. All right, we'll just have to live with it. Okay. There are two curves here. The first one is called the reservation wage curve. A reservation wage is defined as the minimum job offer that you will accept to take a job, okay? Even though we call it the reservation wage, it's really more than just the wage. It's also the benefits package. It's the whole package, okay? Typically, these are drawn as curves. So that's what I'm gonna do. Imagine that was a smoothly drawn line. It is not very smooth. Let me try again. All right, eraser. Let's try again. All right, not much of a curve, but good enough. Okay, now let's put a little label on here. I'm gonna do, change this to red, put it right here, WO for wage offer curve. Okay, now here's the logic behind the wage offer curve. What is the likelihood that when you're looking for a job that the company is going to offer you more money than you ask for? I can see Sable. He's interviewing for a job and they say, how much, we like you. How much do you want to work for us? And Sable says $30,000 a year. What are the odds that they'll go, no, you're worth 50? Sable? I can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm
unlikely.
No.
So it makes sense that when you enter the job market, you start with a high wage offer, right? So that's one reason why the curve starts up here. The other reason is lots of times people enter the labor market without doing their homework, and they have an inflated sense of what they're worth to the firm. Coming out of Mary Washington, it is unlikely that your first starting salary is going to be $100,000 a year. That would be very fortunate if you could find that, right? So for whatever reason, you start at a high number, okay? Over time, and remember the x-axis here is the duration of unemployment in weeks or months. Over time, your minimum wage offer starts to go down, okay? Why does that occur? What's going on here?
They're getting desperate.
One is desperation, okay? It could be that you're running out of money to live on. It could be that you're getting tired of living at home with your parents and they're getting tired of you and they're making noises like, I hear McDonald's is hiring. Why don't you go check out that place? That's what Sid hears all the time. Either way, you really do want a job, and so your minimum tends to drop over time. At first, it may drop a lot, then it drops a little, but it just keeps on dropping pretty much indefinitely until you kind of reach your bare minimum of what it's worth to you. Okay, so does everybody understand why the wage offer curve goes down as the duration of unemployment goes up? Does anybody have any questions about that? All right, good. Now, the next curve that we want to draw is the wage, oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, a big mistake. This is not the wage offer curve. This is the reservation wage curve. So this is RW. Reservation wage is what I described before. It's the minimum wage that you'll accept in order to take a job. So we'll go down here, put a little text in, reservation wage, RW equals reservation wage. Okay, now the wage offer curve shows the cumulative distribution of wage offers that you're likely to encounter as you look for jobs. All right, so let me show you what that looks like. Wage offer curve is going to be upward sloping. Whoopsie, that is not the right color. The wage offer curve is upward sloping. And what that reflects is that the longer you look for a job, the more likely you are to find one at a certain wage level. Okay, so up on the vertical axis is wage offers. No, wages, whether it's reservation wages or wage offers. All right, so let me add this down here. WO equals wage offer. Okay, now what this model does, the way it works is you look for jobs until you find one, until you receive a wage offer that meets your reservation wage. Okay, and so the way we have the graph drawn here, this is going to occur right here. Okay, so the idea is this is not very clever, but okay. Oh shit, man. Here is D0. This is the average duration of unemployment given the wage offer curve and the reservation wage curve here. Sure wish I could move these little bits, but they don't want to move. Okay. All right. So the purpose of this graph is to tell us on average, what is the duration of unemployment going to be? Any questions about that? It's hard to read the body language of people that don't have video. I'm not sure whether that's a bug or a feature. It's certainly a bug for me, but you know. Okay, now, over on this graph, we have our normal Phillips curve. So this is inflation, right? This is unemployment rate. Okay. Now it turns out that the average duration of unemployment is correlated with the average unemployment rate. Okay, so what we can do is we can draw a Phillips curve. Wrong color. No, I still got red. I want blue. Blue, baby. Blue. 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 Really? What's wrong here? Blue. This is not liking me. All right, try this way. Curve. Okay, got it. Thank you. Yes, I am actually talking to my computer. All right, that's pretty ugly. Let me try again.
Hello?
All right. Second time. That's better. Okay, there's our Phillips curve. Okay, so let's say let's make this that's bizarre. Why is it going all the way up there? All right, let's see if I can erase that little mess up point there. Good. Okay. Here's the natural rate of unemployment. Oops. Sorry about that. Hopefully, there you go. And my point here is the measured natural rate of unemployment is going to correspond to the average duration of unemployment. All right. Let me just draw a little circle here. And then let's draw straight line over here. That looks a little tilted. That's better. And then we will draw some text. No, we want, okay. %. We're going to pick 2% as our starting unemployment rate. Okay. Is everybody with me so far? We're now, this is kind of the baseline. We're now in a position to start to do some interesting things. Anybody have any questions?
How does the natural rate of unemployment correspond? Like, to what extent does it change with duration?
100%. Well, no. Okay, let me say this differently. The duration of unemployment moves 1-to-1 with the actual unemployment rate. We're assuming that we're starting with an actual unemployment rate at the natural rate. So we're in kind of a long-run equilibrium situation to start. Okay, let me show you what's going to happen, and then you can ask the question again if you still have it. All right? Okay, let's suppose that it is 2020 and the president is thinking about re-election, and so he wants to pump up the economy. So he gives the order to the Fed and or the Congress to stimulate aggregate demand. Okay, so the idea here is the president wants to move up the Phillips curve with the idea of reducing the measured unemployment rate so that he can say, look how great I am. Okay, we're going to call this initial point. See if I can actually draw here. This is A, and this one we'll call B. This is surprisingly harder than it looks, probably. Okay. So look at it from a firm's point of view. They see an increase in demand for their products. Okay, they don't immediately perceive that it's an increase in aggregate demand. They only see it as an increase in demand for their product. Okay, orders come in. So how do they want to respond to that increase in demand for their product?
By making more?
They want to produce more. And in order to do that, what do they need?
More workers.
They need more workers. How do they get more workers, considering that we started at full employment?
You increase the
Longer
wage.
hours.
Quinn, did I hear you?
Yeah.
So what'd you say?
You increase wages.
You increase wage offers. Okay, so in response to the increase in demand, employers, businesses shift up their wage offer curve to something like, something like this. Hopefully you get the message. Okay, now look what happens as a result of this. Who are the seniors here? Jack, are you a senior?
I'm what is it, the third year?
Okay.
Gary's a
Let's
senior.
see. Jess, you're a senior. Okay. So Jess is, with her shiny new diploma, she's in the job market looking for jobs. And first she asks for a heck of a lot of money, and then over time, her wage offer starts to fall. Now she knows that Greenlaw said it should take 6 months to find a good job. But look what happens to her. After only 4 months, she gets an offer right here that meets her reservation wage. So what does she think? First of all, is she going to take the wage offer?
Yes.
Yes, she is, because it meets her minimum. Okay, so she thinks, damn, I'm good. I'm better than the average person because I found the job quicker than it was supposed to take. Okay, I would pay money to see that happen. But it's not just Jess, it's everyone in the labor market. What's going to happen to the duration of unemployment now?
It goes down.
It goes down. All right. So one of the outcomes, here's D1, one of the outcomes of an increase in aggregate demand is the average duration of unemployment goes down, which is good. Okay. The other thing that happens, and we see this all the time, is the measured unemployment rate goes down. At the cost of the, whoopsie, guess I got to do that from over here, of higher inflation. So this is maybe 4%. I'm just picking numbers out of thin air. Let me see if I can freehand it. I know that's a scary thought. 4%. Okay. Everybody with me so far? In other words, this initial equilibrium on the job search graph corresponds to point A on the Phillips curve. This new one corresponds to point B on the Phillips curve. Now, Jess is pretty smart. Over the course of the first 6 months or 12 months of her job, she suddenly discovers what? She sees that there's actually higher inflation in the economy than she expected. Okay. that increase in wage offer curve was an illusion. In fact, Friedman, who came up with this originally, called it money illusion. Money illusion means confusing the nominal wage that you're receiving with the real wage that you're receiving. So she went for the higher wage offer, assuming that the inflation rate was going to stay at 2% where it was when she was looking for the job. Now she discovers that that the inflation rate is actually higher. So what does that say about her real wage?
It's not as much.
It is lower. She's been fooled in a sense. So as nice as Jess is, she realizes that she has to be assertive. So she goes to her boss and says, hey, boss, I want a raise because of inflation. I want a cost of living adjustment. You know I'm worth it. So the boss can do one of two things. Either the boss can give her a raise, or he can say, go take a hike. She quits. She goes and finds another job. She hopes that will be better. But the boss still needs to fill her position. And when he does, he's going to discover that the next group of job seekers isn't going to be fooled in the same way. Because what's going to happen is they're going to raise their reservation wages to reflect the higher rate of inflation going on in the economy right now. So what we're saying is when workers incorporate inflationary expectations into their reservation wage, the reservation wage curve shifts out, as does the Phillips curve over here. Okay, no, I can do better than that. I'm really surprised you guys are holding it together and not laughing at me. Thank you, Jess. Okay, so what happens on the Phillips curve graph is we wanted to go to B, but we ended up actually at point C, right here. That's a pretty crappy C, but I think you get the message. What happens to the average duration of unemployment? Sid, this is a question for you.
It stays the same.
You mean at D1?
Oh, I thought that we were talking about it coming back when you shift out the...
Well, we do.
reservations.
So what happens is the duration of unemployment goes back to D0. The measured unemployment rate goes back to the natural rate. Okay. Any questions before I take it to the next level and you just go, oh my gosh, this is so cool?
For your point C on the Phillips curve.
Yes.
So it's at the natural unemployment rate, should it be in line with 4%, or are we saying that like inflation like continues to grow, so it's at like 6%?
It should be in line with 4%.
Okay.
So what that means is I shifted the curve out too far. That was my bad. The point is, well, okay, so other questions, and then I will come back to Taya's point, Taya's question. Okay, so is the president happy?
No.
No, he's not. It doesn't appear to be a patient person. So he calls in the the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, and he says, what the heck is going on? You told me you could reduce the unemployment rate. And the chair says, well, yes, but that only works when we fool workers so that the inflation rate is actually higher than what they thought it was. But if you really want to get it down, we can play the game again. We just increase aggregate demand even more. And we end up at point D. Is that going to work? Only in the short run, okay? If we want to keep the unemployment rate below the natural rate for any period of time, what we're going to have to do is accelerate the inflation rate. So we're going to have to go from 2 to 4 to 8 to 12 to 16 to 20 so that workers are always behind in their expectations. Okay, this is what happened during the 1970s. So how did it end? How it ended is at some point, the inflation rate gets so high that voters are more concerned about inflation than they are about unemployment. And then the process has to reverse itself. So how do we get the inflation rate down?
Increase unemployment.
We manufacture a recession, okay? And unfortunately, because these are curves and not straight lines, it is far easier to push the inflation rate up than it is to bring it down. Look how flat the Phillips curve is over here. That means we have to sustain really, really high unemployment to lower the inflation rate only a little bit. So the hangover is really painful. And that's what happened during the 1982 recession. First, what happened is the Fed engineered a recession in 1980, and it wasn't enough. And so they said, okay, then we'll engineer a really bad one in 1982. And that was so horrendous that it brought the inflation rate down. It was very successful at that, and inflation hasn't been an issue since then. Okay. Any questions? I know I've thrown a lot at you here. Okay, I took a picture, which I will share with you, of this graph. I know it's a crappy graph, but it is what it is. So we have done everything except the punchline here. We will start Friday with the punchline, and then we will move on to the even better, more complex, cooler version of the modern Phillips curve. I know you guys can probably hardly wait. I know I feel that way. So until then, I will see you Friday. If you have questions about the homework, please reach out to me. And otherwise, have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Greenlaw.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.